Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born on September 3rd, 1929. Right in Dorchester, Massachusetts. My parents named me James Joseph Bulger, Jr. Before the entire world started screaming my name in the news, I was just a regular boy from the Boston area.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My family moved to South Boston when I was about 9 years old, and Southie became my true hometown. My father, James Sr., was a laborer who tragically lost his arm in an industrial accident, which left our family in a very tough financial spot. We ended up moving into the Mary Ellen McCormick housing projects. It was a classic, tight-knit, working-class Irish immigrant neighborhood. While my brothers focused heavily on their books and went on to find great success in legitimate society, I was completely captivated by the local street crews and the hustle of the neighborhood.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
The newspapers and the public permanently branded me with a nickname that I absolutely detested: Whitey. I got that name as a kid on the streets simply because I had a head of striking whitish blonde hair. I hated it. If you were a real associate of mine or someone in my circle, you never called me Whitey to my face. You called me Jim or Jimmy.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was an unruly, rebellious kid who completely rejected authority. I preferred roaming the streets with gangs over sitting in a quiet classroom. My formal education was cut quite short because I spent my teenage years getting hauled away to juvenile reformatories instead of finishing a standard high school track. I chose the education of the streets, learning how to fight, steal, and navigate the underworld, leaving the traditional schooling to my brother William, who went on to become a powerful politician.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
In 1948, after getting released from a juvenile reform school, I made the choice to enlist in the United States Air Force. It felt like a small, practical way to reset my life or find a new path. But my rebellious nature followed me into the service. I ended up getting arrested for going AWOL several times and assaulted a few people, which ultimately led to a dishonorable discharge in 1952. Failing out of the military solidified my realization that I was entirely unfit for straight society, and I headed straight back into big-time bank robberies.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
My very first official arrest happened in 1943 when I was just a 14-year-old kid. I got caught for larceny, and the immediate consequence was being sent straight to a juvenile reformatory. That first taste of being locked in a cage didn't straighten me out at all. It just introduced me to a lifetime of cycling through the prison system, eventually landing me a major federal sentence in 1956 for armed robbery.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was in the late 1970s and early 1980s when I officially took control of the Winter Hill Gang alongside Stevie the Rifleman Flemmy. We moved our headquarters to Lancaster Street and seized total control of the bookmaking, loan sharking, and drug networks across Boston. When the local press began running massive, front-page investigative exposés detailing how a local Southie boy had completely outmaneuvered the Italian mafia, I knew my name was permanently etched into history.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The public notoriety didn't change my methods, but the protection we had behind the scenes exposed the absolute ruthlessness of our network. We were involved in dozens of gangland executions, extortions, and arms smuggling operations. The fame just highlighted a calculated crime boss who used violence, intimidation, and high-level connections to maintain total dominance over the city's rackets for decades.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
I was ultimately betrayed by the shifting loyalties of my closest criminal associates. When the federal authorities finally began putting together a massive racketeering case against our organization, guys I had trusted for years, like Kevin Weeks, turned state's evidence and gave grand jury testimony against me. They gave the feds the exact locations of the bodies we buried, converting my inner circle into the ultimate trap.
What was your most unique habit or random fact about you that would surprise people?
People are always completely stunned to learn that while I was serving time in a federal prison in Atlanta in 1956, I voluntarily signed up for a secret government program called MK Ultra. CIA scientists dosed me and other inmates with massive amounts of LSD and other experimental mind control drugs. I endured horrific, terrifying hallucinations for months, all while the government was secretly researching how to break a man's mind.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public loved the theatrical story of a mob kingpin, but they never understood the grueling pressure of running a double life. In 1975, I made a deal to become a high-level, top-echelon informant for the FBI, working with an agent named John Connolly, who had grown up idolizing my brother and me in Southie. Managing a violent street gang while simultaneously feeding information to the feds to destroy our rivals was an incredibly stressful, dangerous tightrope walk.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
Our biggest, most defining conflict was against the rival Mullen Gang during the bloody South Boston gang wars of the early 1970s, and later against the traditional Italian Patriarca mafia family. We fought a continuous, violent battle for total control over the city's gambling, bookmaking, and extortion rackets.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
Privately, I was fighting a deep, agonizing heartbreak that I kept entirely hidden from my tough guy persona. In 1967, I had a son named Douglas with a woman named Lindsay Sear. In 1973, when he was only 6 years old, he contracted Ray's syndrome from an allergic reaction to aspirin and passed away. Losing my boy completely broke something inside me, and it was a private grief that haunted me while the world only saw a cold mob boss.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The darkest period began in December of 1994. My former FBI handler, John Connolly, tipped me off that a massive federal RICO indictment was about to hit me. I had to instantly abandon my life, my neighborhood, and my power, and go completely on the lam. I spent over 16 long years living as a ghost under assumed names, looking over my shoulder every single second, completely stripped of the city I spent my life conquering.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth to escape was the label of being a government rat. Throughout my entire life, I fiercely and aggressively denied ever being an FBI informant, claiming I bought information from Connolly rather than giving it. But alone at night, knowing that the official federal files listed me as a top informant while I preached an unyielding street code of silence was a glaring contradiction I couldn't ignore.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
The law finally caught up to me in June of 2011. The FBI tracked my companion, Catherine Gregg, and me down to an apartment complex in Santa Monica, California, bringing my 16 years on the run to an end. I was brought back to Boston to stand trial on 32 federal counts, including racketeering, extortion, and weapons charges. In August of 2013, the jury convicted me on 31 counts, finding me personally responsible for 11 murders. The judge sentenced me to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 5 years, ensuring I would never see the outside of a prison wall again.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The media completely exaggerated the idea that my brother William, who became the powerful president of the Massachusetts Senate, was actively using his political power to protect my criminal empire. While we were brothers who loved each other, our worlds were entirely separate. The press loved to paint a cartoonish picture of 2 brothers running the state of Massachusetts, one from the State House and one from the streets. But it was a massive media exaggeration.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception, which federal prosecutors drove into the public mind, was that I was a loyal government informant who willingly helped the feds. I maintained until my final breath that I never ratted out my people to the Bureau. I used the FBI to protect my own interests and feed me tips. But the history books painted a completely different picture of my loyalty.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
People are always surprised to learn how bookish and disciplined I became during my various stretches in federal prisons, especially during my early years at Alcatraz. I became an absolute voracious reader, devouring books on poetry, global politics, and military history. And I even took correspondence courses in typing, bookkeeping, and business law to keep my mind sharp.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on October 30th, 2018, at the United States Penitentiary Hazleton in West Virginia. I was 89 years old and using a wheelchair due to a severe hip injury. Just hours after I was transferred to that facility, several inmates targeted me in my cell and beat me to death with blunt force trauma.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
My downfall was a mix of both. My flaw was trusting that the protection of a few corrupt FBI agents would keep me safe forever. But the world also changed drastically around us. The federal government began cleaning up its own internal corruption, dismantling the exact protections that had kept me insulated from local police for decades, leaving me completely exposed to the law.
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
Losing my physical mobility and being kept in a maximum security cage as an old man terrified me the most. I spent my life exerting total, aggressive control over the streets of Boston, and being reduced to a wheelchair inside a federal penitentiary, completely stripped of my power, was my ultimate nightmare realized.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
The justice system, the media, and the families of Boston permanently recorded me as a brutal gangland villain and a mass murderer. To some in Southie, I was a neighborhood protector who kept street crime out of our projects. Personally, I saw myself as an outlaw who played a high-stakes, violent game by my own set of rules. I accept how history paints me, but I played the hand I was dealt.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I would just tell the listeners that the street life isn't a movie, and the allegiances you build are only as strong as the next federal indictment. Don't look for easy money on a dark path because the bill always comes due in the end. Thanks for the talk, Calvin.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.